Hi guys! Happy Feeding Tube Awareness Week. I thought in honor of Feeding Tube Awareness Week that I would make a little video and just answer popular questions I get about my feeding tube and just spread a little bit of awareness because it's Feeding Tube Awareness Week. So, the number one question I get is, why do I have my feeding tube? There are many different reasons that people have feeding tubes, but the reason that I have my feeding tube is because every time I eat or drink anything at all, like a piece of candy or a cough drop, I throw it back up. I'm unable to keep it down. Something is wrong in my stomach where it's just not able to digest. The doctors don't know why. At first they thought it was something called gastroparesis, which is where your stomach is paralyzed and is just not able to digest food, or it's just digests really slowly. But they quickly ruled that, well, it took them a couple months, but they ruled it out, and they really don't know. And so we've had tons of testing, and we are going to have a second opinion soon, but as of right now I have no diagnosis, but I'm unable to keep any food down, so I have a feeding tube to keep me nourished, because I need nourishment, because it's very important in life. The next question I have is, what kind of feeding tube do I have? I've had two different kinds of feeding tubes. The first tube that I had was one that went up my nose, and then it went down my throat into my stomach, into my small intestine, because anything that comes in my stomach goes in my stomach, comes right back up. So I had the one that went straight into my small intestine, but then unfortunately I was throwing up so much that I just would throw my tube up, so that was not really an option anymore because I wasn't able to keep it down. I went through 14 tubes. So now I have a feeding tube that goes into my stomach, and it's actually called a GJ tube. It's pinched to my pants. There's two different tubes. This tube goes into my stomach, just straight into my stomach. We don't use that, but this yellow tube just goes straight into my small intestine. The reason that I got one that went into my stomach, even though we're not using it, is just because it's easier to reverse and it's safer. Because if you were to just have one that went straight into your small intestine, and if it were to fall out, which would be really painful, but if it were to fall out, then my intestines would have a hole in it, and that is really dangerous, and I could go like septic really fast. So we decided to have it just go into my stomach, because if that were to fall out, I would just have a hole in my stomach, and that's still bad, but it's less emergent than having a hole in your intestine. So that is why I have the tube that I have. The next question I get is, what kind of formula do you have? I've had two different kinds of formulas, but the first formula that I had was powdered, and it was really thick, and had some bad ingredients in it. Not like bad ingredients, but the first ingredient was high fructose corn syrup, and then there was lots of sugar, and there was a ton of fat, and so it was just really hard for my body to digest, and I just wasn't tolerating it very well. And so then when I got the tube in my stomach, we got this formula. It's called Vivanex, and it is awesome. It comes as a liquid, so it doesn't clog my tube, and it's a lot lower in fat, and it doesn't have high fructose corn syrup, and it's just healthier and it's easier to digest. And so my body is handling this new formula a lot better, and I really like this formula. I suggest it if you guys are looking for a formula. And I have a lot of different food allergies, so this is really awesome because I'm allergic to like mammal byproducts, so most formulas that you'll find will have milk or dairy or something, or whey protein, and that all comes from a cow. So I'm not able to have it because I'm allergic to mammals. So this stuff is a soy base, so it's pretty awesome. I suggest it. So then my next question is, with the formula, are you still hungry and thirsty? Hungry, yes, but thirsty, not so much. My body is not able to tolerate very fast paced pumping, so it all pumps into me, and I get about a little more than 3 ounces an hour. So because I'm not able to handle much faster than that, I have to have it 24 hours. Some people who have feeding tubes, they don't have to have it every 24 hours, but I have to have 24-hour feeds because I'm not able to tolerate feeds that are any faster. So because I'm getting 24-hour feeds, I'm having constant fluids in me, and so I'm very hydrated, and we add extra like water. So I have 16 hours a day on formula, and then the rest of the time I'm just on water, and so I'm pretty hydrated all the time, so I'm not thirsty. Occasionally I'll have dry mouth, but then I'll just chew a piece of gum and I'll be good. My next question is, does the formula make me full? Yeah, no, it doesn't. I don't know why I was about to say yes. I'm still hungry sometimes. I would say I'm hungry like 50% of the time. I'm never full, but I'm not hungry sometimes. Sometimes I'm kind of like, sometimes I crave stuff, and I'm like, oh, it would be really cool if I could like have an apple, but then I can't really have an apple, just because I would throw it up, and that would be not very fun. But I am still allowed to eat with a feeding tube. You're still totally fine. You can eat with the feeding tube. The feeding tube does not mess with the way that your body digests, but my body is not able to digest, so I can't eat. But I do still try and eat. My doctors like for me to try and eat every day just to see if something changes, and then let them know if something does. So I do eat every day. I just get sick every day. So the answer to that question is, the formula make you full? No. And half the time I'm still hungry and craving things. Does the formula feel weird? Yes, you can feel it going in. It's a very strange sensation. It's almost like if you drank a big glass of water and it hits your stomach, and you probably just drank like 4 gulps too much, and it's kind of like sloshy in your stomach. It feels like that, but there's no slosh. It's just kind of like that feel, kind of bloated feeling, and it's weird. You get used to it after a while, but you can definitely tell when something's going through your tube versus when something is not going through your tube. My next question is, can you feel a difference in temperature and texture? Temperature, yes. It's a big difference. For example, with my nose tube, I really liked hot things because it would go down and I could feel the warmth in my throat, and it would go all the way, and it was like drinking a glass of hot chocolate or whatever, just because it was so warm and it felt good going down. And so I actually do kind of miss that about my tube, because now if we were to just put something warm in my intestines, it makes my stomach really hot and I didn't get the sensation, so it's really not worth it. But cold hurts. Cold hurts me. It's very cold, and everything in your body is warm. And so if I'm really hot, I'll put something cold down there, but most of the time we do about warm, room temperature things. And then for the texture, if it's going into my small intestine, I can't tell a difference. But then if it's going into my G-tube, we don't use my G-tube very often, but we'll flush it to keep it clean or whatever. And if we flush it like with water versus something else that's a little thicker, I can tell a difference. And then like it's weird. I can't really explain it because it's a very strange sensation, but I can tell a difference as to if something is super thin or if it's super thick or whatever. It's hard to explain, but I do feel a difference in texture, but only with my G-tube. If it's going into my small intestines, I can't tell a difference. Some people might be able to, I don't know, but I personally cannot feel a difference. The next question is, what is the most annoying thing? So for different tubes, there are different annoying things. My number one annoyance with the nose tube was sneezing. I sneezed all the time. Oh my goodness, you can ask my family. I literally sneezed probably 50 times a day, and I'd start sneezing and then I couldn't stop, and I would sneeze like 9 times in a row, and I never got used to it. I have a very sensitive nasal cavity, and so I was always sneezing, and it was really difficult to blow my nose, because some people, they get used to the fact, but I was never able to get used to the thing right here, like in the arch. If it moved at all, my eyes would just water because it was like hurting so bad. So I had a really hard time getting used to that in my nose. So blowing my nose, of course, everything wiggles around when you blow your nose. So I did not like blowing my nose. But then, because it's up there in your nasal cavity and your eyes are always watery, my nose was running all the time. And that was very annoying. But I think the number one annoyance, though, is getting caught on things. Like walking by a door, and then your tube gets caught on the doorknob. And then walking past, like, a cabinet and it gets caught on the cabinet knob, or standing up and you're accidentally stepping on your tube and you get caught on everything. And oh my goodness, it is so annoying because like you have to watch your tube, and then especially with the stomach tube, if it gets caught on something and kind of yanks a little bit, it kind of hurts because, you know, there's a hole in your stomach. So I've only had mine for about 2.5 weeks, so I'm sure the pain will get a little better because other people, they say that it doesn't really hurt that bad, but it is a very weird sensation if you accidentally bump it. It's not comfortable, that's for sure. And then my last question is, are people rude to you because of your tube? I would say no. I mean, there are some people who are a little rude, but I think the biggest thing is people kind of avoid me, sort of. Like, they'll stare at me, and like everyone's curious. I mean, there's something coming out of me, like, that's not normal, you know, you're curious. But then what people do is they limit their curiosity to staring, and like, when you smile at them, and you like, try to make conversation with you, they're just like, oh, okay, yeah, no, I'm gonna walk away, because like, they're curious, and they stare at you, but then they don't progress the conversation as to ask, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm like, please just ask me. Ask me how I feel about this. Ask me why I have my feeding tube. I want to tell you. But then they're just kind of awkward, and they just kind of avoid you. So then, like, they're trying to be, like, not rude and considerate. But in reality, it's just kind of ignoring me and avoiding me. And it's lonely sometimes, just because like you're just sitting in the corner because nobody wants to talk to you because of your feeding tube. And then like if you are carrying on a conversation with someone, and then someone says something about the tube, or I'll say, most of the time it's me making a comment about something, because they'll say something and it makes me think of something or whatever, because that's how conversations work, right? And they'll say something, and then I'll say something about my feeding tube, and then it's like super awkward, and they're like, oh. And then it's like, wait, why is this awkward? This thing is saving my life. This is awesome. It's not awkward. But I think people just don't understand that most people with feeding tubes are totally okay to talk about it. They want to talk about it. They don't want you to stare at them and avoid them. They want you to talk to them and ask them why they have their feeding tube and make conversation. Because it's a life-saving device, and I'm proud of my tube. I like having my tube. I don't like the circumstances that I'm in necessarily, that I have to have my tube, but I am so thankful for my tube because it is saving my life every single day, and I love that about my tube. So even though there are annoying things like sneezing all the time or getting caught on absolutely everything, it's still pretty awesome. I love my tube, and I'm so thankful for my tube. Anyway, those are all the questions that I get most often, so I thought to answer those. But if you have other questions about my feeding tube, please feel free to ask me in the comments below, and I would love to answer them. I really enjoy answering questions because it makes me feel like I'm contributing. So if you have a question, feel free to ask me. No question is a silly question. So with that, I will say goodnight, and I hope you guys have a great feeding tube awareness week and learn a lot.